So welcome to our Future Transactions podcast, brought to you by Forces Children Scotland, thanks to funding from the Scottish Veterans Fund. And our Future Transactions project is all about supporting families to get prepared financially for when the time comes to leave the military and transition into civilian life. From sharing useful information and advice to sharing lived experience, we certainly hope you find our podcast useful. And I'm delighted to say that today we are joined by Annette from Forces Employment Charity. So first and foremost, Annette, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you.
How does it feel?
Thank you very much.
How does it feel to be on the podcast? Are we all prompts all ready and good to go?
I have prompts slightly to there, so if you see me looking, that is why. But yes, it's really good. I am a huge supporter of Forces Children Scotland, having been involved with it on and off for many years.
Absolutely, because you were telling me off camera that your two children were beneficiaries and they were boarding at Queen Victoria School.
And fundraised. There's footage somewhere of the Forthbridge abseils and things. So yes, we've been involved for a long time. So it's a delight to help. No,
it's fantastic to have here, and I'm really delighted because obviously we've known each other for several years, haven't we? Working in the veteran sector, and it's great. It's great when these links come together. So I think to start us off with, Annette, I was just wondering if you could give our audience, which will obviously be predominantly those in military families maybe thinking about making that transition, or those who have maybe made that transition in recent times. So can you basically give an introduction to Forces Employment Charity?
Right. The Forces Employment Charity is quite a mature charity. We were founded in 1885 and we operate across the UK. We have specialist knowledge and understanding to bridge that gap between military life and civilian employment. And we exist to provide lifelong, life-changing support, job opportunities and training to service leavers, veterans, reservists, and their families, irrespective of circumstance, rank, length of service, or their reason for leaving. We work in partnership with other organisations such as yourself and employers who, like the Forces Employment Charity, respect and value the unique qualities and abilities of those who have served and those families. We provide specialist support to early service leavers, personnel on recovery duty, those seeking executive roles, vulnerable veterans in contact with the justice system and their partners, female veterans, those who are interested in tech and cyber sectors, and partners and spouses, including divorcees and bereaved, and children aged 16 to 24 of those who are serving or have served. Plus, we engage with over 9,500 Forces-friendly employers.
Mm-hmm.
We have a dedicated team of employment advisors who can offer tailored advice to anyone who's seeking to take that next step onto the career ladder, whether they're leaving the forces or have been out for quite some time. We support around 23,000 ex-forces and their families each year, and we create almost 100,000 job opportunities specifically suited to their skills and attributes.
That's fantastic stuff. And as we were talking about at the very beginning there, you're from a Forces family yourself, and you have that experience of this transition too.
Yes, I for my sins, I was in the army for 13 years, and I have been a reservist and an army spouse. So yes.
So moving on to our next topic, Annette. So we're going to talk about now making that decision to leave the military and, what to expect next in the context of finding employment. So I think for many who make this journey, the phrase Career Transition Partnership comes up, or CTP. So I'm wondering if we can just maybe start there with a little bit of an introduction to CTP.
Absolutely. So when service personnel are looking to leave the military, obviously there's certain steps that have to happen through the unit, and they sign off through DIO and all of that good stuff. They then talk to a single service resettlement advisor, and they introduce them, toggle the buttons if you want, to then introduce them to the Career Transition Partnership. Forces Employment Charity works with the Career Transition Partnership by providing the employment support piece to that contract. And the contract is with the Ministry of Defence and a service provider. This allows service personnel to start the process. And depending on how long people have served, means that they will then have a graduated resettlement time and support therein. But the CTP journey is a stepping stone. It is there to help enable service personnel into making decisions, starting that process, looking at actually what do they want to do? Do they want to continue down the pathway that they originally started on, using perhaps their trade? Or do they want to actually pivot and go off in a different direction, perhaps look at change of career, upskilling, retraining, retrade altogether? So it is there as a starting point. It is there to give ideas and to start to get people thinking and to get people engaged with the process. By working through that process, service leavers can have advice and guidance. The staff that are career consultants within Career Transition Partnership are qualified career coaches. So therefore, the advice and guidance they are giving is coming from a place of knowledge. And they touch base, they touch into the clients on a regular basis. Plus, there's obviously a career transition workshop. There are other workshops, including financial aspects of resettlement and a housing brief that service leavers can access. And this gives them a good base to then start working out what they want to do. But service leavers can and do gravitate towards specific sectors. And as a consequence, there is advice and guidance available for that. But those sectors could be things like engineering, defence and security, data, digital, and that includes things like telecoms and cyber. It could be construction, energy and renewables, because these areas are never going to go away. They're going to get bigger. Finance, professional services, health and social care, logistics, and even into things like manufacturing. So looking at the maritime sectors, the aerospace sectors, there are really a lot of sectors that people go into, and that could be they're taking project management through, or they're looking at continuous improvement, or they're using their professional qualifications as a nurse or a physio or an engineer. So they have, tools to their trade already. Some will look at higher education or further education. And again, like I said, upskilling, reskilling. And when people are leaving the military, dependent on what age they are, how long they've served, it can give them a perfect point to pivot. Some actually look at self-employment because they are entrepreneurial, they have really good ideas, they know what they want to do, they've got their USP, they've worked it out. It could be they've already been dabbling within that self-employment piece whilst they were serving, almost a side hustle. And as a consequence, we can then support them, and CTP can support them through people like ex-Forces Enterprise and Heropreneurs to actually then take that big step into self-employment and really scale the business up, look at where the market lies, look at the competitors, and they use all those amazing military skills like a SWOT analysis to actually help their business grow. It's the package that is available is actually fantastic. And it is really down to the individual service leaver to then grab that with both hands, take advantage of it, and wring out every last drop of value from it.
Absolutely. It sounds fantastic. And I think, for myself, just simply having been a reservist, it's not really something that's been on my radar. But I was wondering, with regards to CTP, is this compulsory, or is this something the service leaver has to initiate on their own initiative?
By signing off, like I say, they will go to a single service resettlement advisor. So they should have that second line. First line is the unit, second line is the single service resettlement advisor. And at that point, they initiate a form, MOD form, I think it's 1173 or 1174, can never remember which. But effectively, they initiate that. They toggle the buttons, and that starts that CTP journey.
That's fantastic. And I remember in a previous role that there was a lot of work being dedicated to, look at the trades that you mentioned that they basically complete. And that's a role obviously in the military, and then how it equates to potentially SQA points, transferable skill.
Yes, there was big study done with Caledonian University. There was a big study done with the University of Glasgow, Caledonia, looking at this. And actually, a lot of the trades, a lot of the qualifications now are civilianised. And you've got Institute of Leadership and Management, things like Chartered Management Institute, City and Guilds. So these qualifications all easily transfer. The professional qualifications, so nursing, medicine, physio, all again, easily transfer over. Lots of HR professions within the military gain their CIPD very early on.
Brilliant.
And again, that's exactly what's used within the civilian world. So I think the military has certainly got much better at it. It's certainly caught up, and it's certainly, leading the way, especially when you look at the fact that the military is the biggest provider of apprenticeships.
Oh, wow. Okay.
When you think about it, it makes sense. But all of those apprenticeships are coming up with civilian qualifications that then go through.
Yeah, absolutely.
In fact, I can give you an example. I have a nephew who joined as a REME tech. He is now looking at chartered engineer.
Fantastic. There we go. There's a perfect case. Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect case.
No, so I think as well, because I think I was looking at some of the recent census data, and it was showing that the average leaving age for any veteran is 31. So I think this is so imperative, isn't it? It really is imperative because you've got, you've got basically over 30, 35 years of working life yet to come. It's so important to get prepared, and I think CTP and all the considerations you've mentioned is so important.
There's so much opportunity and so many amazing pieces of information, workshops, courses you can attend, that you're letting yourself down if you don't.
So moving on to our next topic, Annette. So based on your engagement with this community, what are some of the common challenges faced when finding employment, when making that transition to civilian life?
Quite often, and I'm going to use the word clients because we have clients. Quite often our clients find that there's a translation issue. And it's a two-way thing. So civilian job descriptions can be full of jargon. Now, the military is full of jargon, but every industry is full of jargon. If you want to really have your head turned, have a look at the oil and gas industry. It has thousands of, acronyms and abbreviations and even something like a Christmas tree. It's not a Christmas tree. It's to do with oil and gas. Nothing like what we would recognise. So the translation piece on both sides can be really quite hard, especially if you've served for a reasonable amount of time and you don't necessarily recognise that jargon. So CTP and Forces Employment Charity, we work with this every day, and therefore we can translate. And also because we interact and engage with industry so much, we can then say, can we put this into English? What does this mean? And that is really important. So then when a client comes to me and says, and I had a perfect example this morning, I have a really military CV and I don't know what this means in English. I don't know what it means in the real world. Go, right. So here I am sat with knowledge of the civilian world and knowledge of that military world, and then I can make them meld. And that's really valuable because that whole translation piece makes life better. Often, service leaders and veterans cannot see their value. So they'll undersell themselves, perhaps, because they just don't recognise how good they are. Sometimes, of course, ego gets in the way and people overestimate their value. And then there is a very delicate conversation where expectation management really comes into play, saying, okay, but this is not an industry you are, au fait with completely. So therefore, maybe join a little lower, show your value, and then you will rocket up that chain. But actually, you've got to prove your spurs first.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's quite important.
Yeah, I was thinking that even just from that perspective, again, look at some of the data from the census where they were saying, most will join the armed forces maybe 19, 20. It's their first job, isn't it? They've gone through a very different selection process, haven't they? Or recruitment process.
Absolutely.
So, that's really interesting when they might come out maybe 3, 4 years, 5, whenever. This is their first engagement.
They've never interviewed.
Yep.
They've never properly had a job interview. And again, we can support that piece by, within their career transition workshop, they can have mock job interviews. But people like me do mock interviews quite regularly. I am very good at asking interview questions. And the advantage of having someone like me or one of my colleagues is we know why the question is being asked.
Yeah.
And if we know why the question is being asked, we can then explain what the answer needs to be and how to phrase it. And that's really important. An innocuous question that says, tell me a bit about yourself. And people can go right down that rabbit hole. Oh, I've been this and I've done that and I've got X number of children, or I do this. And it's like, but that's nothing to do with your skills for the job. So let's keep it neat initially. And then if they want to know the wider picture of you, then you can flourish like the flower you are. But it's about selling yourself for the job, evidencing your skill, demonstrating your knowledge and skills. Really important.
Yeah, because I thought that was fascinating because I had a chat with a chap like last week, and he's been in the armed forces for 22 years and he's thinking about making that change. And it was really amazing because I asked him, so what are you thinking about when it comes to those next steps? And he was saying, well, I'm looking at certain areas. And I said, you must have so many transferable skills. And he said, yeah, I'm sure, but I'm not really sure how it equates to it. But it was amazing when I asked him, like, so what is your role? And then he said, I'm a W1. And then he talked about all these things he was doing. I'm saying, that's massive. And it's like you say, it's really re-emphasizing that point you've said. It's translating that military language, that role he's played, and how that transfers into civilian life.
And learning to pull those threads of, oh, you've done this. So what does that mean? And how does that? And how many people did you look after? Or how many people do you manage or oversee or engage with? And oh, you deal with this. Oh, but doesn't that mean you do that? And people just don't think of the translation piece of where they could then fit.
No, absolutely not.
So,
Fantastic.
yeah, translation is really important, and giving people the courage is the wrong word, but giving people the confidence.
Yes. Yeah.
To feel safe in applying, and that you might not get that first job you apply for. People have real zigzag careers now, so they're not going to be, in the same job that they started at 16 when they're 60 necessarily. It's rare. And people have different career points where life has got in the way, life has changed things, and there's been, personal stuff that's come into play, and that has forced a fork in the road.
Yeah, I can imagine doing it, because I think another thing that came up in that conversation last week with this chap was that there's a real awareness that in many sectors now there are veteran networks, like in the finance sector, etc. So I think although that's a hugely positive step, but I think too maybe sometimes it's like you were saying earlier, managing expectations that these will be highly competitive, I imagine.
The job market is competitive. There's no way to dress that up, dress it down. And therefore it is about being able to show your value, show your skills, evidence it, and evidence it in a way that the person that's reading that CV recognizes and can then see the benefit of it, of interviewing and hiring a veteran, because veterans and spouses bring so much to the table in terms of all the extra soft skills that come with having served. So they might have been on the tools, they might be a technician, they might be a nurse, but their soft skills that wrap around it, huge.
I think as well, that's a really great segue point there with regards to spouses. I think, we've done some consultation work recently, and it was really interesting to hear from many spouses saying that whilst in service, it's proving a huge challenge to find that sustainable, meaningful employment. And in many cases, it can lead to that decision to leave the armed forces. So I think it's also maybe be very useful to talk about, how maybe the military spouse finds that meaningful employment once they leave the armed forces, having maybe potentially had to sacrifice quite a few things whilst in service.
Quite often, military spouses do, and I hate to use the word subjugate, but they subjugate their careers. They put their careers on hold, or they compress down their careers because there is a societal expectation, apart from everything else, that the spouse will be the main carer, and it could be the caring for children, the supporting the partner or spouse, and also they might have other caring duties in terms of parents. We live in a society where people are living that much longer, and therefore there is this piece. Now, lots of our employers are so pro spouses because they recognise that they come with skills and qualifications, they come with experience, and they have those extra amazing soft skills and natural project management, natural communication skills, natural administration skills. Because if their spouse is deployed, they're doing the bulk of the work. They're bringing up the children, possibly caring for parents, holding down a job, whether full or part-time, and, making it look simple. I have so much admiration for military spouses, and a lot of those military spouses have served. A lot are veterans as well. So there is a huge symbiosis between the Military Women Programme and our Families Programme, because a lot are in the same situation, the same boat. And good employers recognise that, yes, the military is mobile and that you might be posted from A to B to C to A to D. And if they can, especially nowadays, they're much better at flexing those parameters to allow for the flexible working, to allow for remote working. And in honesty, COVID did that a huge favour because it showed that remote working can happen and can happen successfully. You know, I'm sat in Somerset, you're sat in Scotland, and we're recording a podcast together.
Yeah.
I think that, demonstrates beautifully.
Yeah, we'd probably be still switching, exchanging dates and times to get you to Glasgow or something by now. Whereas now, yeah, the thinking has changed. The mindset is different now, isn't it?
Very, very, and I think it's really good progress. I absolutely support the progress. I work remotely all the time, and that's important for my job because I can reach more clients across the UK.
And moving on to our final point within this topic, Annette, I'm wondering, is there any differences in terms of the challenges faced between commissioned and non-commissioned?
I personally don't think so. You can have commissioned or non-commissioned sat with, good degrees or really good skills and qualifications. And the thing is, outside, in the civilian world, there isn't rank. So it is about those skills and talents and knowledge and ability to provide a service, whether that's in an HR role, whether that's as an engineer, whether that's as a nurse. The pathway to progress within the civilian world is limitless.
So moving on to our next topic, Annette, which is the importance of communicating transferable skills and qualifications. So you touched upon it earlier about, for example, getting your CV right. So what would be some of your advice there in terms of getting that CV where it needs to be?
In terms of CV writing, there's some golden tips. Always remember to take a copy of the job description. If the URL gets taken away, you've got nothing to refer to. Work out where those keywords, the keywords and phrases sit. This is important because there is something called applicant tracking software, ATS, and ATS is the computer that says no. Very important to know about it. And even if you know that your CV is going direct to a human being, mark one eyeballs, if you will, in military parlance, then make sure you still write it as though ATS were involved. Now, you can use AI. Don't get your CV written by AI because it doesn't work. But you can write it. There are programs out there that you can then run it through, including the job description, and it will give you a percentage of how you're scoring on it. And it's just with a view to ATS. But you also have human beings around you. You've got your career consultant, you've got employment consultants like me, and we can read it, we can know what we're looking for. And occasionally when you've got applications for things like local councils, local authorities, NHS, civil service, they have specific, not twists, but they have specific requirements that actually need serviced. And having a career consultant, an employment advisor, they can support you with that because it's one of the things we do on a regular basis.
Fantastic advice there. So we've got the CV right. We've done that first bit fantastically well. We've got the interview. So what's the advice there?
Do your homework. Know what you've written on your CV, go back and review it, know what's on the job description, look at the company that you're interviewing for. If you know who's going to interview you, look at them on LinkedIn. There's so much you can do in terms of homework, in terms of preparation, recognizing that you need to be able to smile, look someone straight in the eye, shake the hand, and talk to them, trying not to get tongue-tied. If you know you're going down a rabbit hole because your brain's gone, then actually pulling yourself back out of that rabbit hole, going, do you know what? I am havering. That was not what I meant to tell you. What I should have said was this. Having good questions at the end, always really helpful. And actually going back a second, when you are answering, if it's a competency-based question, so something that starts, tell me about a time when, give me an example of when you did, then look at having a star answer the situation, the task, the action that you individually took, and the result. Now, the action that you individually took is important because they're interviewing you, not your team. And when you're delivering the result, if it happens to just have a metric, a number, a percentage, we increased it by money, or we saved time, or we made a process better, or we reduced, health and safety incident, then again, it shows the benefit, always showing the benefit of you as a future employee. Because if you can demonstrate that, they can see what you will bring to the company.
Fantastic. That's fantastic advice there. And I think, again, if there's some resources we can provide on our webpage, we will certainly do that. That's fantastic. Thank you, Annette. So I think the final point in this topic, I think it's clear, I think having been involved in the veteran sector for a number of years, that there's a perception that maybe, it's certainly evolving in terms of understanding the value of those who have served to civilian employment. It's certainly evolving, it's improving rapidly. So what would be your advice to maybe employers listening to this podcast? But what are the things they can do to make that transition easier?
Oh, goodness. Talk to the Forces Employment Charity. We have employee relationship managers who can provide that conduit. We can also provide opportunities to have webinars and open days so that people can go and talk to them. And it's a learning process. It's a learning process for both sides. But employers can utilize the veterans they have on board already, or the spouses they have on board, because again, they can provide a translation piece and be a buddy, be a mentor, provide a slightly softer landing for a new incumbent into post. But employers, if they can recognize just the multitude of skills that veterans, service leavers, veterans, and their families bring, then they should never struggle to recruit again.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And obviously too, there's, I guess, that reputational capital to be gained maybe through the Armed Forces Covenant, where they can get the bronze, silver and gold awards.
Yeah, the Armed Forces Covenant does provide, the awards, and it shows that you are supporting. And there are certain criteria that have to be met to actually gain the next award. And, that's showing goodwill, and it's showing effort, and it's showing a willingness to really take on board what service personnel, veterans, their families bring to the table. It's good from an employer perspective because it supports their corporate social responsibility button as well. And it might actually engage with, equality, diversity and inclusion. So it's not all one-sided. It's a real win-win for employers.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. So I think we'll just move on to the final topic here, Annette. So, this has been a fantastic discussion with so much incredible knowledge and advice and wisdom there in it. So I'm wondering if we can maybe just conclude this podcast with a summary of your top 5 tips.
Oh, top 5 tips. If you are a veteran or if you're a spouse, register with Forces Employment Charity. If you're going through transition, utilize that CTP. So that's tip 1. Tip 2, research your job market. Know at what you want to do. Really consider what your red lines are, what your drivers are, what makes your heart sing, what your potential dream job is. Because then you can work out what you want to do next. Look at, where you want to settle. If it's transition, look at where you want to settle. If it's somebody leaving the forces at the end of their career and they have family and spouse and everything with them, look at where you want to settle. Look at that job market, research it. Look at childcare options. Look at housing options. Know what you're landing in before you make the jump. Option 4, network. Whether that's LinkedIn, whether that's done at the local post office, whether that is talking to people in industry, talk to people, network. Get cheeky, ask for 10 minutes of their time. Offer them a coffee. People don't often turn down a cup of tea.
That's true.
They will give you that time. Free cup of coffee. Yes, please. And I suppose 5th point, whilst you're starting that planning and your training and looking at upskilling really early, consider your lifelong learning. You could be starting that lifelong learning. You could be starting that upskilling way before you leave the military. You could be plugging into things like Tech Vets, which is one of our sister programs, and you could be looking at gaining knowledge, qualifications, experience well ahead of time. And actually, there is one last one, which is number 6. You get my freebie. Don't panic. Do not panic. Plan. No, military phrase, no plan survives first contact. Know where your compromises are. Know what your fallback is. Know an overview of what you want and go for it. Good luck.
Brilliant. I mean, fantastic stuff, Annette. And you were telling me before we started recording that, those top tips were basically gathered from the team, all of whom come from Armed Forces community families.
Absolutely.
So if not, that's fantastic stuff. So I think all that's left to do in it is just to offer my sincere gratitude for joining us on this podcast and providing all that wonderful knowledge, information and advice. It's really been fantastic to host you here. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.